back to the revolution. It's Randy's DIY, and we're doing some air conditioner work on our Fleetwood Revolution 40D motorhome. I think pretty much all of these air conditioners are pretty much the same. If you go back here to the back, you got a compressor. I've already started this, I'm sorry guys, but you got a compressor that mounts right here on this. There was a bolt here, a bolt here, and I was able to get that compressor off. There was two AC lines connected to the back of it. I mean, that's stuff that pretty much anybody, if you got any business working on an air conditioner, you can figure that out. And I am no AC man, so you know, I figured it out. You can too. Basically, I took two bolts off the compressor. It's a Sandin compressor that was here. It was locked up. Wouldn't turn, clutch wouldn't turn, pulleys wouldn't turn. Everything's locked up on it. Took these two bolts out, took the two hoses off the back, unplugged the wire connector, and yanked out the compressor. Called up AC Parts in Texas, and they sent me a new compressor. They helped me diagnose everything I needed to do. Great people to work with. Thumbs up to those guys. I'll probably put a link in the description down there to their place. I've already had this out. This is the condenser core, and man, if you got a diesel pusher with a side radiator, I beg you, you need to take the condenser off occasionally, take it loose, or at least wash it out. I sprayed mine down with some stuff called LA's Awesome. It's degreaser. You could use Simple Green. You could use coil cleaner, you know, if you want to be appropriate. Anyway, I've got these. I took these lines off. Now, whenever you take lines off of these compressors, condensers, evaporator cores, they're all aluminum. So be sure and put a line wrench on both sides, on the hose side and on the condenser side, or you're going to twist that off. You're gonna have a really bad day. So I've already taken these off. I'm sorry, I started doing this before I thought about making a video. But one thing that you'll want to do on these pushers with a side radiator, this thing was clogged up so bad with grass and debris, road debris, I couldn't believe it. When I took the condenser core off, I reached in between the transmission cooler and the radiator, right down in there. And this thing was from this end to probably a third of the way down the cooler, was completely full of grass, dirt, rocks, all kinds of stuff in between the transmission cooler and the radiator. So this portion of the cooler wasn't doing really anything because air couldn't flow through it. You need to get in here. You need to dig this garbage out that was behind it. So there's still a little bit of grass coming out of there. I took some cleaner, LA's Awesome. I sprayed my condenser. I removed my condenser, took it over against the house, and sprayed it down with the LA's Awesome and a water hose. You have to be careful. Don't put too much pressure on these. You don't want to hit them with a pressure washer, or you'll fold the fins over, and that's kind of a bad thing. You don't want to block the airflow. This one I just hit with some degreaser, and I actually hit the transmission cooler and the radiator with a pressure washer from a pretty good distance back. Cleaned them up pretty good. So the problem with mine was the compressor had locked up, and when I took the compressor off to check the color of the oil, according to AC guys out of Texas there, he said to pull the compressor off, check the color of the oil. If it was brown, you definitely need to flush the system, replace the expansion valve, and that's the job. I'm going to show you that here in just a second. I took my compressor off, and I got maybe one drop of oil out of it, and it was orangey brown color, and that kind of worried me. So I called up the AC guys in Texas. Like I said, I'll put the link in the description, and they're super nice guys. I talked to Richard, and he says, look, if there's no oil in the compressor, it's somewhere else in the system. It could be in the condenser, it could be in the evaporator, and most likely the expansion valve has stopped up due to probably the dryer going bad and releasing some stuff, or the compressor shavings getting into that area. So here we are up here in the front, and I've already got some things done up here also. You can see I've got a towel stuffed in the hole where the evaporator core was. And here's the dryer. It mounted up here. So I was trying to get the part number off of this dryer, and that's kind of that's the issue, because these things are, see, they're just generic part numbers made by, I don't know, Fleetwood or somebody. This one I think has already been worked on before. So I was talking to Richard, and he says take this fitting out and drive a screwdriver through it. It's got a plate and a burst plate in here. They're shipped sealed. These systems are shipped sealed, and when you screw it together and activate it, that plate bursts. And whenever you have to go into the system, be sure and go in here and knock this hole into this thing to where it can just free flow through and actually flow better. So we're gonna do that before we put our new dryer on. I got a new dryer, I got a new compressor, I got a new expansion valve, and all that goes in this hole right here. And this is what I was telling you about. It's a pain. So part of my evaporator, or my plenum for the evaporator, came through the firewall out to about here. And you can see this hole where it went through. So it wasn't an easy task to get out. This was the condensation drain, and then I had a couple of hoses. This hose and another hose goes up here to the evaporator core. Let's go inside and see what we got. So inside, get this blanket out of the way. Inside we got this, and you basically have to take this whole section off in front of the passenger seat, the dash area. And then once you get this panel off here, mine was carpeted. I took all the carpet out, put wood in, and this is now vinyl covered, leather, whatever you want to call it. This section was a piece of plastic. It slides into here, here, and here. It had a couple of screws in it. And so with some finagling and finesse, I was able to get this panel out. And now your air plenum, I wish I would have done this before I took it apart, but sorry guys, I didn't. And it's just something you're gonna have to figure out, I guess. But that air plenum came back to here and all the way over to where that hose is. All the way over to this vent hose right here. So it filled up all that area right there. And with some prying and unplugging some wires that was connected to it, and prying and snatching and pushing and pulling, after a while we finally got that plenum out. Let's see if I can show you some of that. There's the both the panels that we removed there at the doorway, the dash pieces. And here is half of the plenum. So the motor went into here, and the evaporator core sat right here. So the air blew through the evaporator core and out the other side. Let's see if I can find this. This is the other half of the plenum. So there's what the plenum looked like. The evaporator core set in here, and then this was the outlet for the air to come into the coach. Don't really know that I can show it to you any better since I already got it taken apart, but hoping this will help some of you guys out, I didn't know what I was doing, so I really wasn't going to start the video until after I got it, after I got it out. I thought, hey, we need to show some folks this. Anyway, that is the air plenum. Squirrel cage here, blows fan, and blows air in here, goes through the evaporator core, and then cold air comes out this side, and this hooks to the this points directly up and actually goes into the heater plenum, and then the heater plenum distributes the air out of the vents, and of course when you have the heater turned off, none of the heat comes through the heater core. So anyway, hopefully this helps you a little bit, and at the end of the video, when I start putting this stuff back together, I'll try to make a video of it going back in so you can see the reverse procedure of it coming out. Maybe that'll help you a little bit. This is a job that you don't want to tackle if you're scared to mess something up. I'm going to show you something else while I'm here. See these two heater hoses right here? This is the heater core. All right, this is the secondary heater core. There's two in this unit, and the way Fleetwood made this, they come in with a larger hose, and had a splice right here. They had a splice on that heater hose right about here. So it was a big hose on this side, a small hose on this side, and then it connected to the heater core. Well, these were leaking. When I bought this coach, these fittings were leaking right here, and of course it was going right down on my wood floor. Luckily antifreeze doesn't really hurt wood. It kind of helps it, really, keeps it from rotting, and it's not good for it to be wet. But what I did is I went and bought some longer small hoses and some short big hoses, and this is what I did. I moved the connection from the big hose to the small hose outside the firewall. That way if these two joints leak, it's just going to leak on the ground. It's not going to wet my floor and cause me all kinds of trouble. So if you do the air conditioner thing that I'm showing this video on, check that. Make sure you're not going to have issues with those reducer fittings leaking and getting your floor wet. Just a bonus tip there. So there's our AC hole from the outside, our condenser hole. This is our evaporator, and I know what you're thinking. Where is the dryer, the expansion valve located? Well, I'm going to try to show you that, even though I've got it taken apart, because you cannot successfully flush an AC system with the expansion valve in place. So you're going to have to take, if you need to flush it, you're going to have to take the evaporator core out, and you're going to have to get that evaporator core out of the circuit so you can flush through here. So what I did, boy, I really need another hand. So this is the hose and the pressure switch that hooks these two together, and I'm going to pause the video for a second and put this together so you can see what it looked like before I took it apart. Okay, so here it is, put back together the way it was. This is the little temperature sensor that clips under this bracket right there. So this actually clips under a bracket, and then you wrap all this gooey stuff around it to insulate it. That's a temperature sensor that goes over here to the expansion valve, and if this gets too cold, it'll shut the freon flow down to where it don't freeze up the evaporator core. This is pretty much the way it came out when I got it out of the plenum box. Both of these hoses were here. You can see where the plenum was. Oops, sorry. You can see where the plenum was pinching around these two insulated pipes. But that's the way it looks. And of course, this was one of the plugs I had to unplug. This expansion valve has to come out. Now, there are multiple different sizes of these. There's metric, there's standard. This one happens to be a 14 millimeter 1.5 pitch, I think, and this is a 22 millimeter 1.5 pitch. And if you have a micrometer or a caliper, dial caliper, you can measure these, and Richard can walk you through it and get you what parts you need to get your AC back in line, back in shape again. So anyway, what I did is we basically just took off the expansion valve, laid it over here to the side, and at this point you need to flush this guy out, because this is where all my oil was, I believe. So Richard sold me some of this stuff. It's Master Chem AC Flush Fast Evaporating Solvent Cleaner Flush, and it's made for ACs. It doesn't leave any traces of oil or anything. Basically what I did to flush this thing out was put a funnel in there, poured I don't know, what is this? This is I think this is, I don't know, it's quart. So I poured about a half a quart total. I poured a little bit, 4 or 5 ounces in, and shook it around, tipped it every which way I could, and got it all through the fins and everywhere, and let it soak for a little while. And then I took an air compressor, sealed the air compressor nozzle around one end of the hose, one end of this, and blew air through it, evacuating all the oil and contaminants out of there. Filled it up again. I did this about 4 or 5 times until finally nothing was coming out but clear out of it when I blew through it. And I actually blew through it both directions too, in case there was anything on the other side. So just flush until you get clear coming out, nothing, no brown or anything. And that's the way I flushed the evaporator. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the condenser core back off again. I'm going to lay it on my bench, and I'm going to put 4 or 5 ounces in it and cycle it through those cooling tubes several times, blow air through it, do it the same way that I did the evaporator until it runs clear. Once I finish that, I'm going to connect onto the lines there and blow that cleaner through all of the lines until we get clear coming out of all the lines. And then I'll start this video back up when I start reassembling everything. And I hope you enjoy this. Hope you're learning something. I'm learning as I go, so don't take this as I'm an expert. If you do this to your rig, do it at your own risk. I'm doing it at my own risk, and hopefully this thing's going to work out. If it doesn't, I won't post this video. Randy's DIY. This is a long video, right? So what we got here: nitrogen, got some 134A, got a vacuum pump, got our gauge set, got our low side going into the evaporator, got our high side going into the dryer, the receiver dryer. This receiver dryer actually has a window on it, and these are the 2 little fittings that I knocked out the valves inside of. Let's see, those valves are laid right here. Let me get them. Okay, so these 2 pieces were the valves, and they work something like that. When the system was charged from Freightliner, when they sent it over to Fleetwood, and until they screwed these 2 together and compressed those springs and released that seal, that's how they charged it. So no one knows. I've called Freightliner, I've called Fleetwood. Nobody knows who charged the system, but I've got it figured out. Freightliner did it, but they didn't know they did it. Nobody can tell me how much Freon, how much oil goes in the system, except for AC parts guys on Texas. They giving me some really good information. on this stuff. So if we look here, we got about as close to 30 pounds as you can get of vacuum. I vacuumed this down twice already, and I'm going to show you the way I'm doing it. I'm going to show you the way I'm doing this. If I can get this. Give me a second here. Okay, so the way I'm doing this is I'm pulling a vacuum, getting this down to close to 30 as you can get it. 30 is impossible from what I'm told. And you can let it set. I let mine set. I pulled it down for, I don't know, oh man, I vacuumed it down for like 5 hours because I was told that, water boils in a vacuum at a low frequency. So, the longer you let that vacuum pump run, the more water it boils out of the system. And being that this one's been open for a week or two waiting on parts, I let it run for about 5 hours the first time, and then I'll just show you what I'm doing. So let's do it one more time. We're going to close these valves off. So now both valves are closed off. I can turn my pump off, and I can unscrew our vacuum line from the pump, and it's going to turn into a pressure line from the nitrogen. It's dry nitrogen. Alright, I'm going to turn this on. I've got it set for around 70, I think. Yeah, around 60. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly add nitrogen into the system. What we're doing is we're replacing the vacuum with nitrogen. We'll stop at about 30 pounds. I don't want to do it. I've already done this 2 or 3 times. And once we get to this point, I'm going to open the high side and let that nitrogen circulate through the system. And I'm just doing this for you guys because I've already done this twice before now. Never hurts to get all this water out of it. The reason we want all the water out is because when this Freon goes through that expansion valve, it super cools itself. If there's any moisture in the system, it's going to ice on that little small area, that small pass-through area. And when it does that, it makes that little orifice smaller, and the Freon can't flow like it's supposed to cool properly. So we got to get all of that moisture out of the system, and the way I'm doing it to make sure this is such a big system is vacuum it down, flush it with dry nitrogen, vacuum it down, flush it with dry nitrogen, vacuum it down, flush it with dry nitrogen. This is like the 4th time, I think. So we've got, I'm gonna leave about 8 pounds on there. I'm gonna close all that off. Get our nitrogen line over here and turn it into a vacuum line again. And we're gonna evacuate all the nitrogen out of the system. Now this coach, I carried it and had it evacuated at a shop. They pulled all the Freon out, and after it was evacuated, I then replaced and flushed every line on here. I got videos previously that you saw all that. But right here, if your system's like mine and had these pre-charged valves in here, be sure and put your new, I missed this earlier, and I forgot to put an O-ring right here between the dryer, receiver dryer, and the this adapter. and it held pressure really good. It held vacuum really good. But then I went and put 70 pounds of nitrogen on the system to pressure check it before I went any further. And I sprayed all these joints down with soap, and this joint was leaking. And when I took it apart and looked at my old dryer, I noticed that I had missed an O-ring. So guys, if you do this, it's a huge job. If you do this, I would recommend, highly recommend, getting you a bottle of nitrogen and pressurizing the system up to 60, 70 pounds, and spraying all your joints that you had apart down with soapy water, and see if you got any leaks, because this one was just barely leaking. It would hold the vacuum, but it wouldn't hold 70 pounds of nitrogen pressure on it. So recommend making sure, check all your connections. I had a leak, and it would have been devastating to get all this thing charged up and find out a week down the road that my Freon was gone. Anyway, so what we're going to do now is we're going to kick our compressor back on that we got the vacuum line hooked up, and now we're going to open the low side just slowly. There it goes. We're in the vacuum area now, and now I'm going to open the high side, and you'll watch the low side go back up. There it goes. Now both sides are open. I'm going to pull the vacuum through the whole system again until this gets as close to 30 as it can get. And another tip I've seen is these gauges, when they get down to 25, this is a cheap gauge set, it's Harbor Freight. If you get a Yellow Jacket or something, it may not do this so bad, but most all the pros I see, they tap these gauges. And when you tap it, just about every time it'll move down a little bit. So there you go. We're going to go ahead and let that pull down for about probably another hour. I'm sure it's not necessary to go that long, but guys, I want all of the vapor, all of the water out of my system. So we're gonna let this guy run for about another hour. This is gonna be the, fourth or fifth time that I vacuumed it down, and most of those times this compressor has run 4 hours the first time, 5 hours the second time, 2 hours the third time, an hour the fourth time, and I'll probably run it for 30 minutes, an hour this time. And this system should be free of any moisture. I mean, as best as I can get it anyway, with the equipment I've got. Anyway, I'll come back to you when we start putting Freon in. Thanks for watching again. See you soon. Oh yeah, forgot to tell you, my compressor came pre-oiled. So I got to looking at the size of this RV, and I thought, you know what? That compressor could be for a pickup truck. It could be for a 18-wheeler, which has 4 or 5 feet of Freon lines. This one's got 40 feet of Freon lines. So I called AC guys, AC parts guys in Texas, and I asked them about the oil quantity that needs to be put in here. And I've read on the internet that for everything that you flush, you need to add approximately 1 ounce of the appropriate type of oil. In my case, it's PAG 100. So the dryer 1 ounce, the evaporator 1 ounce, and way back there in the back, the condenser 1 ounce. And then I figured for the lines, I'd add a ½ ounce. So I'm adding 3.5 ounces extra to my system. And what I did is I poured it straight down the return line that goes back to the compressor. So half the oil's in the compressor, half the oil's in the front. And once the compressor kicks on, starts cycling, it should push the oil out of the compressor with the Freon and carry it toward the front, and at the same time it'll be pumping oil back to the compressor from the front. And this was I called the AC parts guys in Texas, and they agreed with what I read on the internet. Their recommendation was 3 to 4 ounces. So You see that hand move a little bit when I tapped it. So 3 to 4 ounces is what they recommended. I put 3.5 ounces in it. Extra oil above what's in the compressor. And another thing is, when the AC guys said, since we don't know how much oil goes in this system, the way you tell this is watch this. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I've got a chart, and I'll put it in here in just a minute. I've got a chart that tells you your static pressure, which means nothing running and just filling Freon. Like if you turn your vehicle off, let it sit for 30 minutes, what the pressure would be on both the low and high side should be equalized, and at a certain temperature that should be a certain pressure. So that's the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to look at the outside temperature, and I'm going to feel this thing until it gets to the recommended pressure for static pressure, and watch both gauges, make sure they're both the same place. Now once we get to that point, I'll crank the RV up, start it up, and the AC parts guy said watch this window for bubbles, and keep putting Freon in until the white bubbles disappear. The white, we don't want any white bubbles in that window. And then at that point, when the white bubbles disappear, that's when we start watching our gauges and trying to hit the spot that's going to be in the chart that I'm going to put right here somewhere in the video. And you're trying to hit these numbers on these gauges, and hopefully everything will work out. I put Freon in. The compressor just kicked on, and it's about 85 degrees out here right now, so the high side is going to go over to about 225, which is where I want it, and the low side is about 27 pounds, which according to the document I'm going to put on the screen next, it's going to tell you that 27 pounds is about where we want it. This is actually dropping to 25, so I might need to add a little bit of Freon. And it's getting hotter out here, so the high side's coming up. The condenser's probably not getting cooled good enough sitting still. I'll probably talk with the AC parts guys and see if they recommend adding a little more Freon to the low, to see if we can get this low side up to 27, and or if we're more worried about the high side over here. I'm not really sure. Anyway, your big line is just frosty cold. Little line going into the evaporators, got a little, little warmth to it maybe. Condenser, kind of air temperature. No bubbles in the hole, no bubbles in the window. It was bubbles, but they weren't. It's not a real good indication. What I did is I put it in watching the gauges instead of the bubbles, and I glanced at the bubbles occasionally. And then after I got it charged to close to where I thought it needed to be, then I watched the bubbles to make sure that we didn't have any bubbles flowing through there. Anyway, guys, this is we're blowing cold air inside, and I'll come back and give another video just a little bit later on after we make sure everything's going and get all this stuff buttoned back up, put the dryer on the firewall, get everything back the way it's supposed to be. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.